Apologies for my voice. I've got a bit of a cold. I may be coughing a little bit through this. It's one of the advantages of working remotely. I don't need to worry about infecting my colleagues. So this past weekend I took some time in the DOMImpl class as part of GWT-2 and rewrote as much as I could into using JsInterop and the existing elemental 2. There's a few methods here where I've made some dumb mistakes, so let's just take a quick look at what this used to be and how I'm porting it. The first thing was to remove the JSNI itself. So we no longer need the /* before the braces, and we no longer need the semicolon at the end or the native keyword. And on its face, it looks like this would be sufficient because there's going to be a native method to actually call click. Unfortunately, this isn't going to work because button element's click method is going to call DOMImpl button click, which is the same method we just edited. So we're going to have to change this. The easiest way to do this is to make it into an HTML button element. Through the use of unchecked cast, since we know exactly what this is going to be. Now we could actually use a normal cast here. There'd be no problem with that. The downside of that is that it's going to do a runtime instance of check, and it's going to make sure that the button is still a button, and it obviously will be both before and after. So now we've got the actual button, we can click on it. So we've got a different type of button. This will compile out to just the one JavaScript call, the button, which is itself the native call. So far so good. Now, why do we even have this method factored into here? Well, we can see from IntelliJ telling us this method is overridden in the Mozilla impl. It generates an actual click event and then dispatches that. Now, why does it do that? It's a good question. We would have to find out, but my guess is that this is designed for some extremely early version of Firefox, where it was not yet possible to have a click method on that element. So if we poke around just in Firefox here, bring up some page, it doesn't matter what, and see if we can tinker a little bit and see if there is in fact a click method. So let's make a button. And it is, in fact, a button element, exactly as we said it would be in our elemental code. And there's a click method. So, no longer do we even need to have that click method. Just for a little more fun here, let's just add an on click. This, it always amuses me when I do this. It looks remarkably like the Java that we would use. Except that we can use single quotes instead of double quotes, and our arrow has to be an equal sign instead of a dash. So we've assigned a, oops, oh, of course, I need an equal sign. And then button dot click. And indeed we get the log message correctly. So this is no longer necessary in anywhere near resembling a modern version of the browser. So I've gone through and I've changed quite a number of these other methods already. Create button element. I start with the given document. Part of the contract of create button element is that it will get a document passed in. Initially this was so that we could pass in $DOC, which was the document in GWT-2, excuse me. But it could be that we're trying to run this from inside of an iframe, so we want to specify an alternative document. So the code here is nearly the same. We've taken out the various bits of JSNI. We've replaced var with HTML button element. Now, of course, var would still be possible if we were ready to use Java 10, but we still would have other changes, like replacing doc with something else. We can't just call create element. Because that is going to, again, redirect us back into this very same class again. So what we have to do is treat the document as a elemental HTML document, and then from there call the create element. Now, here I was using the old style of cast. I think this is a mistake. And that this is what we want to do instead. This seems like a clearer way of conveying this, and it will avoid runtime cast checks in our resulting JavaScript. So most of these are pretty boring. We probably want to uncheck cast this on the way out also. Here's one that I've taken a little more liberties with as I changed it. This originally was using the old create event, HTML events, syntax, and then using init element. However, this has been deprecated and should no longer be used, and instead we should be using init element. Now for some of these, like I believe this one, when we look at the Firefox implementation for this, it's not that one. Here we go. Create key event impl. When we look at the Firefox implementation for this, Mozilla, we see that there's an else block here to say, okay, in IE 11 and beyond, it turns out that IE pretends to be Firefox as far as GWT is concerned, and we just say, nope, sorry, I can't create that synthetic event. So instead of the old style of init key event and create event, document.create event, we want to look for another way to create an event. So we've got a wide variety of event objects we can create here. The one we're after in this particular method is a keyboard event. So instead of create event, keyboard event, we actually have a keyboard event class with a constructor. And as it says, init key event is deprecated. We should not be using that. Instead, we should be using the keyboard event constructor. So to get a little more detail on that, we've got the type arg, which is key up, key down, etc. And then there's an init object, which allows us to specify what we're doing when we create this. So if we're assuming a modern browser here, and this is all JavaScript, so we're going to need to change this to be plain Java. Let's look at key press, for example. And this is defined up here. Okay, it's abstract. So let's try rewriting this in plain elemental. So here's our keyboard event, already defined for us in elemental 2. And then keyboard event does indeed have the constructor we expect. We want to specify the type, and then the init object, which will specify all the parameters, control key, alt key, shift key, meta key, pair code. So we know it's a key press because it's part of the name. We may end up inlining this method so that it shares its implementation with a couple others, like key event here. So it's got a key press, and then we're going to need a event init dictionary. We don't have a constructor for it since it's an interface. So instead we have just a plain old create method. We've got a few setters. We've got setChar, setCode, composing, key, locale, location repeat, alt, bubbles, cancel, composed, control, detail, Lots and lots and lots of them. So we only need to worry about the ones we actually have got setters for. So control is the first one, control key. And then alt. You get it. So now we have set char, but the parameter we have passed in is char code. So what's the difference we're going to see there? So let's look real quickly here. The spec has key, code, but no char. So it looks like char might actually be something which is either non-standard or this page is out of date. It also accepts fields from UI event init and event init. So we should check those very quickly to make sure it's not defined there. We've also got some specs we can look at here. So no char in here, no char in here. That makes sense. Here's the keyboard event. Key and code, but not char. Apparently this is outdated. I'm guessing it's going to point us back at, nope, not at that one. There we go. Alright, so here we have some legacy details. The key press event is the traditional method for capturing key press and processing them before the DOM has updated. Okay. Here we have char code, key, and code, but no char. So what exactly is Elemental trying to do to suggest that we can use that? So let's switch to another workspace here, one where we've got the closure externs. Keyboard event init, key, code, and here's char. So they seem pretty certain that this is a legal way to do this. They quote the spec document. Keyboard event init, key, code, location, repeat, composing. Key, code, location, repeat, composing. And then char and locale are added also, but they don't seem to be standard. So just for fun, let's try it out. Let's see, what were we actually doing over here before? We were setting up a key press event. So we know that'll work. Target, key, char code, key code. Interesting. Still has those legacy objects. Doesn't seem to have made a difference here. It's not clear to me where we'll find what that should actually be. Both of these should be a string. Let's make the key instead for fun. I'll try a different value. Nope, no effect there. Okay, so that did change it. And that changes that, but it doesn't look like there's actually an impact to setting the char value. So this may be a bug in Elemental too. We'll want to visit this more later. But if we do want to set the char code, and for fun, let's look at what the implementation used to be here. It used to use the char code passed to init key event. And then char code arg, an unsigned long representing the Unicode character associated with the depressed key, otherwise 0. So these are the old way of doing this. So from this, the fact it's labeled char code here, and from the fact that it was called over here with this char code, I'm guessing we just need to say, look, there's another property here, you can't see it. How should we be using it instead? So one more time, looking at the new constructor and its init object. Keyboard event takes an init with a key and a code. And I'm expecting that this is going to be the same Unicode value. No, it's not. The code is a string referencing the key object itself. And the key is the string representing the value that would be typed. It's the Unicode string. It's not a long at all. It's not a number at all. Okay, so that may be garbage at this point. It may not be possible for us to correctly implement, sorry, wrong project, this char code without first converting the char code into a key, into a string somehow, turning that number into a string. That'll be better done off camera, so I'm not going to worry about that right now. So we've got other options here. We could go ahead and actually convert this using the old pattern, using the old API, but I would still rather use the new one, even if we have to cheat a little bit right here. So JS property map of, let's see, can you actually hand it another object? No, we can't, so we'll have to cast it. We're going to be assigning a string, so we're just going to lie to the compiler a little bit. Unchecked cast of event init dictionary, set char code. Oh, I'm sorry, that was wrong. So why am I casting to double here? Well, for better or worse, JavaScript and Java don't quite get along in how numbers are formatted. If this were to be boxed as an integer, then it would no longer be a JavaScript object. It would be an opaque Java object, which JavaScript couldn't use. By casting to double, we can guarantee that it's not going to get boxed. I don't think that set has, oh, it does have do not auto box. Well, actually, never mind then, we're safe. Do not auto box is a way to cheat the compiler a little bit and say, whatever I pass in here, if it was a unboxed value, like an int, don't box it up with an integer, and just pass it directly as is to the underlying object. So that's what we can do. It's a little bit ugly, but we're dealing with a legacy API here, one which should not be supported in Elemental, because anyone who's using this method should really stop doing it. So let's go ahead and mark this as deprecated. This is not the right way to create anything with a char code. This isn't used internally at all, except in another Java doc. So it shouldn't be a big issue. And then we have to return this new value. Return event. Event is the wrong type because it's keyboard event, whereas we want a native event. That is to say it's elemental versus the built-in JSO object. So we'll have to cast it. And there we go. One more method ported. Let's look at this one here. What does this mean? Or 0. In JavaScript, we've got this notion of truthy values. So if there is a detail object attached to something, and it's not null, then this will evaluate to false and will return 0 instead. But if it's anything other than null or 0 or false or any other falsy value, then we'll return the value itself. So event.detail, that's usually a custom detail thing of some kind. So let's again treat this like a property map, treat the event object. We don't know what's going to be in there, so we'll do object. And we want to read out detail. Now ideally this is going to be an integer. We've got this handy falsy check, which will do the same kind of check. Otherwise, we're going to say return it as if it was an int. As int is going to first of all make sure it's an int, and then return as if it's an int without any cast. One more method knocked off. Let's back up to here for a moment. This is an abstract method. There's two different implementations. There's a WebKit implementation also. In the WebKit version, we delegate to create key event. We pass in key press. So let's look for create key event quickly. Here it is down here. We create an event object, and then we assign all these various properties. We've got some comments here from the last person who tried to touch this. WebKit's keyboard event cannot set or even initialize char code, key code, etc. And UI events, char code, and key code are read-only. So we fake it using a raw event. So this isn't even a keyboard event that we're creating and passing out. Rather than try and set it with char code and key code, which interestingly we're not even doing anything with here. Type, bubble, cancel, alt, shift, meta. That's a little weird. We assign char code back here. Okay. So the question will have to be, and we'll have to test this to make sure it works. Can we in Chrome go ahead and create a object, a keyboard event, and then assign char code to it? Let's try Firefox real quick first. We started experimenting with this earlier. Is it not here? No, it's over here. Okay. So it was actually set to 1. Right, okay. So now we're going to want to try this with Chrome. So as in Firefox, we'll try something like this. Sorry, this. Let's see what it does. So e.char code does exist when you do it this way. and that still assigns it correctly. So it looks like the constructor with the dictionary here is the way to do it.